Madam Supervisor, I do have 6 o'clock, and I think we have all 4 board members we're expecting present.
Okay.
I have 5:58.
A little early.
Oh, well, and again, there's no rush.
I have 5:58.
Wow, my clock must be speedy.
It must.
Keeps you moving that way.
You gotta
That's
go
okay.
with back time rules. So,
Right.
Okay, I'm showing 6 o'clock now. So I'd like to call to order this regular board meeting of the Saugatuck Township Board, Wednesday, July 8th, 2020 at 6 p.m. And we'll do a roll call. Bigford,
Here.
Helmrich,
here,
Marcy,
Here.
Osmond, here, Aldrich, excused. Mr. Graham, would you like to talk about some instructions?
I would be happy to. I think if I'm remembering correctly, this is going to be our 4th township board meeting via Zoom. So I think we're all getting to the point of being pros by now. But for folks who may be joining us who haven't participated in one of these meetings before, I'm going to go over just real briefly a few instructions to hopefully make sure this meeting goes as smoothly as possible. So a few reminders for everyone. Please say your name before speaking. It's especially helpful for folks who are joining us via phone or who don't have camera capabilities. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself for everyone else's clarity. For folks who are on the phone, as a reminder, *6 tends to be the mute or the unmute button. Please don't click any unknown links that may be shared in the Zoom chat. The township does not plan to share any information or links that way. So just for all of your security, you're encouraged to not click any links there. This meeting is going to be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube consistent with the township's past practice. Please be respectful of those speaking and especially those on the township board as they do have regular business to be attended to at this meeting. And lastly, I don't anticipate this being an issue, but if anyone does get to the point of being disruptive and it prevents the township board from conducting their business, you'll be given 1 warning, and after that, you will be removed from the meeting. Other than that, please just be patient. This continues to be a new process for everyone, and we're going to continue to do the best we can to run a smooth meeting. So with that, Madam Supervisor, I'm happy to hand it back over.
Let's look at the agenda and see if we can't get a motion.
This is Bigford. I'll move to approve the agenda and to ratify the procedures for public participation and meeting conduct as described in the notice of public meeting via video conference.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Brenda. Marcy?
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Bigford,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Helmrich,
yes.
Osman? Yes. Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Now we'll open it up to public comments. I have a couple of comments I'd like to make. Some of you might be here for the appointments to the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. You do not have to make your comments during the public comments, as we will open that up for interviews at the time we reach that on the agenda. Having said that, are there any other people that would like to make public comments?
I would. This is Lori Goshorn.
Yes, Lori.
I was reading the packet, and I'm glad that the protection of wellheads is on the docket for consideration. And having been to a couple of Planning Commission meetings, there was some discussion of an industrial park that I think Scott Bosgraf was putting in, and he had mentioned floor drains, and that was one of the things that, and his area where he's doing that is in one of the areas of protection. I'm just curious how you're going to be handling that, and maybe even the ski lake across the street, which is talking about extractions, sand mining and so forth. That is something that was also noted on the lists of things that would not be allowed in those protection areas. And I'm wondering what you're going to do with existing or already approved projects that that are in the works, or that, you know, are recently passed and so forth. You know, what kind of considerations you're going to be taking in that, and I'll be interested in hearing how the discussion goes. Thanks.
Thank you, Lori. Is there anybody else? Griffin, do you see anybody?
I do not. I'm gonna try to unmute a few people in case they are not able to unmute themselves. If you'd like to comment, please let us know. Otherwise, feel free to mute yourself again.
Yes, Scott Stearns would like to comment briefly. I just joined. Sorry for the delay.
Yes, Mr. Stearns, floor is yours
Oh, okay.
for a public comment.
Right, exactly. That's what I have. Hang on one second. I didn't know I was going to lead off like this, or maybe I'm not, but okay. Thank you, everyone. I live and own property at 3462 Riverside Drive. And so traveling south on Riverside from Dugout Road, mine is the last house that is served by Riverside. I offered input at the December 2019 board meeting when it was decided to advance a request for road work, which included Riverside and Dugout, to the Road Commission for action and response. At this point, 6 months later, I'm still trying to understand what is being proposed, what is being planned, by whom exactly, and according to what process and timeline. The road work is often referred to as a plan, like the 2019 road plan, the 2020 road plan amendments. But to my understanding, that would mean a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something, and I can't get many details. I spoke with Griffin and also Craig Atwood in May, but the most I learned at that point was that a right-of-way consultant had been retained and that a letter had been distributed to property owners. Now, I know of 2 Riverside residents who received the letter, but I have never received one myself, and I'm curious why that would be. I'm definitely impacted by what happens with Riverside and Dugout and any determinations related to its right-of-way or easement provisions. I also noticed that the project for Riverside Dugout is described by the Road Commission as a rehab, and I want to just pause a minute and remember that rehabilitate is to return something, especially an environmental feature, to its original condition. So what I'm trying to learn, and if anybody can help direct me or answer any questions, that would be great. What portions of Riverside Drive will be rehabbed, if that's the right term for it? The only thing I see is like in the 2019 road plan, it says Riverside Drive, north of Pond and Dugout Road, west of 66th Street, with cul-de-sacs 2 for 0.39 miles. And then it says in the amendments, Riverside Drive and Dugout Road west of 66th Street, select tree removal and asphalt millings. I've seen two figures quoted. I've seen approximately 75,000. I've seen approximately 129,000. I don't know which is the one to go by or even how those numbers came about. But I'm trying to understand, will the work include portions that are marked on the 1906 plat and subsequent surveys, which reference portions as Poplar Road? Because I think you may recall, or maybe not, from December that actually the last three properties at the south end of Riverside, according to the plat, are not on Riverside. I don't know if that's why I didn't get a letter, but anyway, I'm just trying to understand why or why not I didn't get a letter, how these things are being determined. And I also don't believe that letter that I did see, even though I didn't receive one, and I'm about to wrap up here, stated that that they were thinking about changing the right-of-way from the 1906 plat. And I don't believe necessarily that the original right-of-way should be disregarded out of hand or without a compelling cause or a common benefit. And I particularly would be impacted by dismissing or moving the right-of-way because access to my place is very difficult and challenging. I won't go into that right now, but I just want to close and say that at the December meeting, I expressed a concern that prematurely passing a request for road work to the county could result in a top-down or broad brush approach. And I'm still trying to get assurances that what is being done, that the actions will be taken will ensure that all stakeholders, and particularly those who live and own property along the affected roads, will be heard and their interest is preserved and respected in a fair, transparent, and equitable manner. So thank you, everyone. I know there hasn't been much action the last few months because I think it still is in the hands of the county, but I am concerned that I haven't been receiving communications. And if there are any other materials, any other things that constitute a more detailed plan, I would really like to know about them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stearns. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Can you state your name, please?
I just remuted myself with *6. John Doerr, 3468 Riverside Drive. And I would just like to echo Scott's comments in terms of kind of have a lack of understanding as to what is actually being proposed and the process for what is going to be determined to happen. So anything that can be communicated with the property owners along Riverside would be much appreciated. Scott did a much better job than I could state it. So just echo Scott's statements. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment? If you're on your phone, unmute yourself and state your name, please.
This is Steve McCown. Can you hear me?
Wow.
Can you hear me? I'm getting all kinds of echo on that.
Steve, we're getting a lot of feedback and echoing.
Okay, is this better?
And you have a phone going.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Can you see me or am I just on audio?
Just audio.
Okay. This is my first time, so I apologize.
No problem.
My name is Steve McCown, and I live at 2845 Lake Breeze Drive here in Saugatuck Township. I am a retired attorney. I think you can see me now, possibly?
Yes.
Okay. And I've represented townships and people involved in zoning matters over a course of about 35 years, until retiring recently. The reason I'm addressing the board tonight is in connection with the appeal that was filed by the Saugatuck Dunes Coastal Alliance regarding the Township Planning Commission's approval in 2017 of PUD and site condominium application for the development of marina and housing complex filed by North Shores of Saugatuck. I did send a letter to the board which is on today's agenda under correspondence. I hope the board's had a chance, an opportunity to review that as well as the resolution that was attached to it. As you know, as board members up to this point, Saugatuck Township has taken the position in the appeals that are going on that the Coastal Alliance do not have standing, that is the right to bring an appeal. They didn't have standing to appeal a planning commission's decision to the ZBA. The merits of that appeal were never considered. The Circuit Court in Allegan and the Court of Appeals both agreed with the township's position, and the matter is now before the Michigan Supreme Court, which, as you probably know, in May of this year, issued an order directing the participants to submit additional briefs, supplemental briefs, addressing 3 key issues. One of them specifically included the question of whether the lower courts correctly interpreted the language in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, which governs appeals from planning commissions to zoning boards of appeal, which is what we're involved with in this case. My hope is that the board will take the opportunity to reverse the position the township has previously taken regarding standing. I believe the lower courts incorrectly applied the precedents concerning standing that had to do with cases involving appeals directly to the courts. And they applied those instead to appeals from the Planning Commission to the ZBA by interested persons. If the position taken by the lower courts and previously at least, or up to this point by the township, is upheld by the Supreme Court, I think the practical effect would be to put citizens who are on the Zoning Board of Appeals in a very difficult position, because they would be placed in the position of as if they were judges hearing an appeal in the court system, which they're not. They're not legally trained typically, although some may be lawyers. And they're asked to, if this standard is applied, they're asked to make decisions on standing, which are actually complicated decisions for judges to make. I think that position is poor public policy. It also is has the effect, if it's adopted by the Supreme Court, of limiting public participation in local zoning decisions, which is not a good thing. It is still possible for the board to reverse course and ask the Supreme Court to grant leave to appeal in this case, and ask the court to address the standing issue as it relates to appeals from planning commissions to zoning boards of appeal. There is really no guidance at the top appellate court level in Michigan on this issue, and this would be the opportunity to do that. I understand that this is not on the agenda tonight. This is very limited time period for doing this. If the board decided it wanted to do this, it would need to do it promptly. That I would suggest even within the next week at a special public hearing, because there are time limits on when appeals would be filed under the court's order. And the township attorney, if the board reversed its position, would need a reasonable time to prepare a notice to the court. So I don't know how much of me you heard, but I appreciate time listening to this, and I hope you can take a look at the letter and the resolution as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments to be made? Please remember to state your name and unmute yourself. Anybody else? We're getting down to the last chance here. This is your opportunity. Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting. Move on to review of invoices. Has everybody had a chance to review the invoices?
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's Helmrich. I'd like to move that we approve all bills and payroll in the amount of $65,518.94 as presented.
Is there support?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Okay, we have a motion by Helmrich, supported by Bigford. Is there any further discussion?
The issue was, this is set to, I put in a password. and after
I'll go ahead and
15
call the
minutes,
roll.
The password had to be redone.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy? Marcy? We'll come back to her. Osmond, yes? Marcy?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Motion carries. Our next item is the treasurer's report.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to say we ended our fiscal year last week and started not only our new fiscal year, but our new tax year this week. And where we're standing right now, I'll just share with you some things. Our general fund bank balance is at $2.7 million. It's down 100,000 slightly from May 31st. More importantly, our budget to actual spent through the end of June, the end of the fiscal year, was $427,000 positive, an increase from May. Spending itself ended fiscal year at 30% under its budgeted amount, while revenue finished at 7% under at the close of fiscal year 2020. That figure is across all of our funds. I did want to point out that one of the biggest contributors to those positive numbers is within the Water Projects Fund, which spent well below budget, and revenue at the same time for hookup fees primarily was well ahead of budget, which contributed to this positive ending to the fiscal year. In the general fund alone, revenue came in at 97% of what we had budgeted for, and expenses came in at 83% of budget. Again, a pretty fiscally conservative and prudent year has just been completed. On the investment front, which we'll talk about more later, but our one investment right now, our certificate of deposit, is at $760,000, and that actually went up $4,000 from May, which is not too bad to have performed in June during the current situation. Again, just to look at some of the fiscal year end numbers again and report to you, we ended the fiscal year as we've been tracking throughout the year. We had no departmental overages that need to be reconciled at this point. Revenue for all forms of permits, in particular, I want to point out, because combined permitting was 88% above what we had budgeted for. And another positive note, state revenue sharing, our final payment for the year came in last month, and it actually came in slightly above what we had budgeted. It's expected to trend lower in the new fiscal year as the state holds on to more revenue and shares less of it under the current economic challenges. But in terms of where we ended the year, it's all very, very positive. As I mentioned, we started the new tax year. Summer tax bills went out and hit on July 1st. And interestingly enough, after less than a week, the rate of return and people paying is well ahead of the way it was the last 2 years. So it's just interesting to note. We have encouraged taxpayers to pay by mail or online to limit exposure and having to come into the office. And so far, that's happening. And just another note, we'll know more about this next year, but there is legislation pending in Lansing in both the House and the Senate that would extend the due dates on the summer bills into March of next year, and would not allow us to charge interest or penalties on what would have been late fees. If that were to happen, applicants, taxpayers, it wouldn't be automatic. They'd have to file an affidavit with us by the middle of August, I believe. And but concurrently with this, the county would loan the township the amount of money deferred. So that's all. That part's good. It sounds a bit like a logistical nightmare. I was on a webinar today with the Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association, and we're all waiting to hear, because this would actually change the due date sent out on the bills, but The legislature's been on in recess, so we'll see what happens. They're guessing it's about a 50% chance of passing, and then we don't know if the governor would sign it. So hopefully have more information on that next month to share. And with that, I'll entertain any questions, or we can move on.
This is Bigford. I have one question, John.
Yeah.
And I think I know the answer, but when people are paying their tax bills online, do they get charged that whatever it is, 2 or 3% fee? And if so, is there any way, I suspect there isn't, but is there any way to waive that?
They are charged 2.8% by the credit card processing company. It's not a charge of ours. They take it directly from them and we get the net of what's due to us. And in that case, no, because it's an independent company. I have heard that some municipalities have found a way, but everyone uses a different process. So right now we would not have that capability.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for John? Okay, we'll move on to the minutes. I take it everybody's had a chance to review the minutes.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
This is Marcy. I move to approve the minutes of the May 13th, 2020 regular meeting. Uh-oh, something's blocking that. As presented.
Second? Anybody want to support that?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries. And we'll move along to correspondence. We have a letter from McCowan, letter from McElwain, a letter from Fall, and a letter from Cook. Any comments about those? Otherwise, we'll accept them as information. Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. We have Planning Commission appointments. We have 2 terms that are expiring, and we received several applications. At this point, if there are those of you in the audience that wish to introduce yourselves as potential candidates for those positions, I would ask you to unmute yourself, state your name, and introduce yourself to the board, and we may have some questions for you.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
I can't tell who's talking, so please state your name.
Yeah. I'm sorry. This is Richard Brady.
Yes, Richard, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the time. Yes, I did have an application in for the Planning Commission as well as a reappointment to the ZBA. I'm ending my 3-year term, and I do have an interest in both. I'm a resident here. I've been here since 2010. I moved in 2014 when I retired, and I do have an interest in having a community that grows and does the things that make sense to do for the health of the people and the security of the people. On the Planning Commission, I would like to just add, though, is that I am out of town 3 to 4 months a year. Now, I know with the COVID and the Zoom, that may not be a big thing, but I do want to make that up front known that I am out of town for the winter months. But I am a resident of Michigan here, and I like it here. And I am also the president of our homeowners association here in Singapore Trails condominiums. So I do have an interest, and I'm looking forward to being a part of the Planning Commission if such. And also, if possible, be a part of the ZBA again as an alternate. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Are there any questions for Richard? John, do you have any
Well,
questions?
can I suggest we get introductions first? Because I'm trying to ascertain if all the applicants and incumbents are present tonight.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do we have any other applicants who would like to speak?
Daniel
Yeah.
DeFranco.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go
Daniel, you
ahead.
have the floor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel DeFranco. I'm applying for the position on the Planning Commission. Just a kind of little bit about me. I've lived here since and owned a home since 2016, so somewhat new. But me and my partner have kind of really thrown ourselves into Saugatuck. We feel super passionate about the township and the community as a whole. We live kind of a rural existence. You can't really see, but I have chickens all around me right now. I work at Phil's Bar and Grill in town, so I'm involved in a community business where I see many of you and am able to engage with you. Full-time position, I work as a college lecturer at Grand Valley State, teaching philosophy. And where that might seem totally impractical, I've actually taught many classes that I think are quite relevant to issues that are dealt with on the Planning Commission. I've taught professional ethics a handful of times, environmental ethics, political theory. I work very closely with students and kind of trying to present issues to them in such a clear way that they're able to kind of see or get a kind of entry into it and begin engaging with those issues themselves. I kind of got into local politics, not seeking to do it, but got into it because there was an issue in my own neighborhood where there was a proposed sand mining operation, and the residents and I all kind of got together to research the issue, pose the issue. We were not successful, but the project itself, or just kind of engaging and networking with our neighbors, doing all the research on sand mining and the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, and current court cases in which mineral extraction is at the heart of it. I learned quite a bit about it and have learned about how, the state government is kind of looking to tie the hands of local municipalities. So looking back on the decision, I absolutely understand why the decision was made in the way it was made. But it was a great learning experience to kind of go through it myself. And I also think that just the knowledge of the, kind of an intimate knowledge of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and current court cases still proves relevant right now, as there are active issues relating to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. Right now, I am involved in local government, and I'd like to thank the board for appointing me to the newly formed Tri-Community Recycling Committee. We've had so much success with it. It's very exciting. Being a newly formed committee, we didn't have necessarily a clear vision of what our purpose was. And so a lot of the work we've done is kind of identifying that purpose and kind of clarifying, what our vision is. And I don't know, Patrick Stewart is still on the call, but Patrick Stewart is also one of the representatives from Saugatuck Township, and another representative, Mark Epstein. We got together and we kind of determined that we had a commitment to the tri-community area. We have shared interests. But there are also a lot of challenges with recycling that are specific to the township. And so we've been kind of working on dealing with those challenges independently. And there have been so many fantastic residents who call into our meetings, and I've been able to connect with them even though they're not on the committee itself, and just kind of get their sense of what their concerns are with recycling, what they see as an appropriate or an acceptable solution. I've been able to reach out to Griffin, who's been an incredible resource, and identify ways that we can move forward and overcome those challenges. Working with the tri-community representatives has also been great. I've made a lot of connections with Garnett Lewis and Barry Johnson, who sit on the city council. I've talked a lot with Ronna Alexander from Douglas. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that's feasible. With our shared resources, a lot of these things are things that we can actually accomplish and really will improve the success of recycling in the communities. But I've also seen how good planning and foresight and strategizing and reaching out to residents to see what they really think is just so helpful. And that's kind of something I would love to bring to the Planning Commission. So I kind of see the Planning Commission as having two distinct responsibilities. You know, they are making decisions in the immediate moment, but there's also this aspect of looking forward to the future and creating a plan that's transparent to everybody in the community, a plan that kind of respects and takes into account the interests of the various stakeholders in the community. And as a resident who had no prior experience to politics coming into local politics, I did in the beginning feel kind of intimidated. The actions of the most recent board and even the Planning Commission have given me so much more optimism, and I would love to continue that. And I see transparency as being just a huge issue, to be able to say, this is what our values are, this is what our interests are, and being able to put that out there so community members know. And then if residents are interested, they can even volunteer their services. Because, you know, the recycling committee is all volunteers from the local municipalities, and they're doing so much. So I would just love to be able to engage in proactive planning, identify our challenges, be able to create something that, you know, is tangible, that people can read, and that people feel comfortable with the direction that, you know, we're going in, and are able to participate too. And so that kind of is my interest, and going forward as a member, I would absolutely be diplomatic. These are things that I've learned from the recycling committee, listening to stakeholders, understanding what their interests and perspectives are, because I think understanding those things allows us to better respond. But I do think the township, and I know that we have been doing, the Planning Commission has been working on their new 5-year plan, but to do more of that kind of gives us a huge leg up. And there are just so many challenges we're facing right now with rising water levels, invasive vegetation in the water, a pandemic, struggling businesses. I do think that having a plan will ease a lot of anxiety, will get people involved, will continue that momentum that we have going. So that's kind of my vision. But I want to thank everybody for listening to me, and good luck in making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I think Denise is probably ready to speak. Denise, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you, Denise Shipley here. A hard act to follow there. Sorry, I'm been in the township for 20 years. I've been following development and just wondering how I've been able to get involved in this. Seems like the perfect opportunity. Honestly, I would say my best offering to the Planning Commission would be my ability to research. I research and love research. And yeah, I love critical decision making, and especially about the place I live, the place I love, and where I've raised my children over all these years, and the place where I expect to live for quite a number of years to follow. So with that being said, I have started a planner program with the MSU. It's fascinating. And I'd be open to any questions that you'd be asked of me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Denise. We may come back to you with some questions. Is there anybody else here who's interested in serving on the Planning Commission? Anybody else? Okay, we'll open it up to questions from the board to our applicants. Is there anybody who'd like to start? John?
Sure. What was that? Yeah, so Daniel and Denise and Richard, if you want to join in too. I just was curious if you've been able recently at all to read the current existing tri-community master plan?
So this is Denise. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I recently have had the opportunity to go away and visit with my daughter. I've been gone for a time, and I just literally rolled back into town in time to join the meeting. So I wish I could say I did. I have not. That's my honest answer, but I will certainly catch up with everything as soon as possible.
Well, it's on our website.
I started reading it. I'll be honest, I did start reading it. I've read quite a bit of it, but I don't want to say that I have to. I like to read things several times before I like to comment on them. So thank you.
It's a big one to digest, and as I think Daniel mentioned, I mean,
It is.
The board has been reviewing it as we're supposed to do every 5 years, as is the planning commission.
I did learn through the MSU class that I've been taking about the reviews of it, or about the replanning of it. So I do understand the process, and it is lengthy. And I like to read things numerous times before I'm able to say that I certainly fully understand it. So.
Daniel?
Yeah. I have gone through most of it. I think it's super impressive. There are a few things that aren't, I don't want to say not relevant anymore, but there are a few things that Michigan state law has kind of undermined, especially when it comes to mineral extraction. There probably needs to be some updates, but I mean, the heart of it is just incredible. So there's just so many ideas in there that we could play around with. Working with Garnett and Barry Johnson in the city, I know that there is interest in doing more collaborative work. And I think it'd be fantastic to explore some of the ideas that are being presented, because so many of the suggestions or plans of action for the goals are really collaborative efforts. So I think it's a fascinating document. I think that it's great because we don't have to reinvent the wheel, that so much of what's in there is substantiated through surveys of the actual residents. So it really does represent, what, people thought or, continue to think, their views. And I would love to delve more into it and actually turn to it as a guide in making decisions, that, this is, we can turn to this and say, well, it's in here, it's in the master plan. The master plan didn't come out of nowhere. It was a product of an intensive survey that was done for, residents of the township, for the city and the village. This is, how they feel, this is what they value, and these are projects that we should pursue.
Thank you. Richard?
Yes, like the first candidate, I have not really had a chance to look at it. I have not looked at it. I'm aware of elements of it. I know it's under a re-review, but I have not taken the time, and quite honestly didn't realize it was available online, but I have not looked at it, and but I will do so. But in all honesty, I have not looked at it.
Okay, John, do you have another question, or shall we move on?
It's up. Do you want me to ask now or wait?
Go ahead and ask, because
Okay.
somebody else might want to be asking the same question. And
True. Yeah. I'd like to hear from each of you, and let's limit it. I mean, if you had to pick one, maybe two, if you're succinct, issues that maybe you feel the Planning Commission should be addressing more fervently moving forward, or maybe has neglected, what one or two might come to mind to you today?
Daniel?
Probably off the top of my head, mineral extraction. I think that we definitely need to be more confident in knowing the law. When the mining across the street went through across the street from my house, as a group, we submitted recommendations to the Planning Commission. I don't know if they accepted them, but they were kind of basic things like update the requirements for approval of a special zoning permit to reflect Michigan state law. There was confusion on the board as to, in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, it says that a mining site can't be denied unless there are very serious consequences. And this is not a dig at the board, but in general, it's very confusing what very serious consequences constitute. Fortunately, there are recent court cases that start to specify what those are. So including that, so there's just there's more. We have more substance to deal with, and I think that the board would feel, or the planning commission would feel more confident going forward. I'm also thinking affordable housing and just the housing market in general. Recently, we got high-speed internet. I know that most of the township is slated to get high-speed internet. We're in the middle of a pandemic. My partner works in real estate. His phone has been blowing up from people who live in the city and either want to break from the city altogether, some with kids, some with not kids, or they want a second home here. So I do imagine that what's going on now is going to have some sort of long-term effects, and we did have issues with affordable housing prior to that. So I do think that that's something that is absolutely worth considering. So I would say, kind of just being prepared to deal with issues related to mineral extractions, because there are ways to better prepare ourselves and be more confident in responding, and then being better able to communicate to the public why that decision was made. And then, affordable housing, which I think is an issue prior to the pandemic, but might actually become intensified due to the conditions of the pandemic.
Thank you, Daniel. How about Denise?
Hi. Yeah, so let me think about, I sometimes think about moving people around in the area, transportation, what's important, keeping the character of the area, especially as we grow here, in the people that live here year round, and especially in the summer months. Something that's kind of interesting to me is the traffic on the waterways, the bike paths, parking, and how do we make people safe in the space? How do we keep the character of the area? How do we uphold our environment? Very important to me. Moving people around in the space, I think, is something that is especially interesting to me. That's what comes to the top of my mind. That's what I have at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Denise. Richard?
Yes, probably what really my interest is, and my interest in for the community is, it's such a nice township, and the growth that we've got here and the potential we've got with the resources we have, and just being on this side of the state. I come from the east side, from a city, and we moved here for a purpose, and because we like it here, and it's very nice, and we see that we like to have that continue, and want to make sure that directionally we continue to have that environment for the health and safety of the people, for the pleasure of the people that do live here, as well as the people that do visit. But again, for the people that live here, making sure that what do they want, and trying to give them what they want as we move forward. Because again, I think we have such great potential here, and I think sometimes we really need to understand what the people want, and try to.
Brian?
What is according? I'm sorry?
I think that was somebody who's not muted.
Oh, okay. So anyways, but basically I'm looking at, how we can tailor this community to what the people, what they desire, and look at what makes sense here, and from a healthy and secure standpoint. So that's pretty much where I'm at on that one. So thank you.
Thank you. John, do you want to come back to the rest of your questions and let somebody else ask?
Absolutely. Let's move on.
Okay. Abby, do you have questions, please?
John stole my question. I just kind of wanted to ask what causes people could see themselves taking up, and how they saw themselves being proactive rather than reactive on the planning commission. And I think that the candidates already addressed that. That was really the only question I had. I did want to clarify, is Chris Lozano on the call?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a confusion.
Thank you, Abby. Brenda, do you have any questions?
I do not. John sits on the planning commission, and I figured he would be our resident expert. I really appreciated the, I was surprised by the strategic planning, forward-thinking ideas. But no, the applications that we got and the information we got combined with what they have said is, I have no further questions at this time.
John, do you have more questions?
Do you have any?
I just have a comment. I'm a little concerned about somebody who's not available year-round. It does take a quorum to take any action. And the winter months are especially difficult to get a quorum because people do travel, and then there's the weather. So that is a comment that I have a little bit of concern about. I'm glad Richard was upfront about his residency status and when he's here and when he's not. Denise, do you have any problems with attending meetings during the winter time?
I do not.
Okay.
I live around, and my children are all grown and out of the house, so no, I'm home with time on my hands.
Okay, and Richard, do you have any comments about when you're gone, and is it going to be 3 months or?
No, pretty much right now we're gone 3 to 4 months, but I am available by remote, and that's what I think indicated on the application. But I do know, it's always nice if you have meetings in person and issues that may come up. It's nice to be here. I understand that, but I am always available by remote and meetings such. So it's not an issue with me as far as time. It's just a matter of location.
Okay, good.
Thank
and Daniel?
I'm here year-round.
Okay, very good. John, do you have more questions?
No, not really. I mean, they've been answered in various forms. I wanted to just make sure to pick up on what Abby asked. By my count, I just want to confirm this because this is a pretty important decision we're looking at. It seems to me that we had 6 applicants for these 2 planning commission slots, including one incumbent. And then by my count, please correct me if I'm wrong, 3 of the 6 are with us tonight and have spoken with us. And 3, including the one incumbent, did not participate. Is that right?
That's what I understand.
Okay. And the
I
other,
don't know, Griffin, if you can see anybody else that.
yeah. And just
might
for
be
the
on the
audience too, the other incumbent, you might be wondering, withdrew from being reconsidered for another term. So that's the situation we're in right now.
Well, I'll tell you all, we were hoping to make a decision tonight. We have 3 really great applicants here with us. If we don't have any more questions for them, I could entertain a motion.
Cindy?
Yes.
Don't you have to make the motion?
Oh, that's correct. I do. Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
I'd like to make a motion to, or I'd like to appoint Daniel DeFranco and Denise Shipley to the Saugatuck Planning Commission, each for a term of 3 years, and I do need confirmation of the board.
I'll second.
Do we have to make a separate motion or just second?
I think that just a second is good.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'd just like to thank everyone who did attend tonight. And also, he's not here, but we'll get to him, and thank Andy Preetz for his service. He has served as chairman for, I think, 3, maybe 4 years.
Thanks, John. Anybody else have any discussion?
This is Bigford. I'm excited. As of late, we've had, for our last several open seats, we've had lots of wonderful applicants, and we have, some other applicants that weren't on the Zoom call that were strong, and I encourage them to be like Daniel DeFranco and keep trying, because eventually you'll get appointed. And I just am really grateful that we have these people that are willing to serve. and that are really forward thinking and thinking about how we can see the big picture and move our township forward.
Thanks, Abby. I would like to thank Denise for her initiative to take the MSU courses from the Extension Service. They are excellent courses, and to do that without any prompting is pretty impressive. And Daniel has been around and been to the Planning Commission meetings, and he really, I think, has a very good grasp of how they operate and what needs to be done with futuristic planning. Any more discussion, Brenda?
Nope.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Osmond, yes. Marcy?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Right.
We can move on to the next item, Zoning Board of Appeals appointments. We have one regular term expiring, and we have 2 alternate terms expiring. And before I get too far along, I'd like to say I'm a lot less concerned about year-round attendance for an alternate than I am for a regular member. Alternates are great. People get sick, people travel, and I'm a big proponent of alternates. So are there is there anyone here who wants to introduce themselves as being on the Zoning Board of Appeals?
Yeah, this is Richard Brady again. So I am currently one of the expiring 3-year term for the alternate, and I would like to reapply for that again because it does work out like you indicated, and I think it has it's been beneficial for the township as well as myself in that position. So I would like to take that on again if it's available and if it's the right thing for you guys to approve. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Is anybody else wants to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate or as a regular member?
This is
Yes. Hi. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go
Patrick?
ahead. I'm an alternate, and I'd very much like to continue that in preparation for being a member. But my life situation has changed, and I'm going to be gone 3 months, 4 months a year, spread out. And I think it's only fair that you know that. And make your decision that way. But I'm always available when I'm out. But I will be. That's a change. Most of the time, I've been around the last couple of years.
Perfect. Is Rex Falker here? Rex, no Rex.
Mike, I think, but
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Mike tried to speak up. At the
Okay,
same
Mike.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So it's an honor to come before you all. My name is Mike O'Brien. My wife, daughter, and I live at 3293 Lorimar Lane. 21-year residence here in Saugatuck, having raised our daughter, born and bred into the Saugatuck area in the Saugatuck School District. So like all of you, I believe deeply in service. I served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps, sort of a 5th generation Marine, so it's sort of ingrained in us. I left the Marine Corps and moved back to St. Louis, Missouri, where I hoped to run an organization known as Grand Center. It was a private-public partnership redeveloping St. Louis's arts and entertainment district. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to learn and apply the trades of community planning, zoning. We did a lot of work with right-of-way projects, sidewalks, streets, developing parks, and then public-private spaces, as I mentioned, redeveloping St. Louis as an arts and entertainment district. It was a fantastic opportunity. Later went on, and when we moved here to the area, worked for USF Holland, a large trucking company in Holland, Michigan. That many of you have seen the trucks going down the road. I built and ran their real estate department, $70, $80 million a year in budgets, building trucking facilities across what was ultimately 18 states, primarily in the eastern United States, some states hopping over the Mississippi, if you will. And my primary responsibility there was, as I mentioned, building these truck terminals, which was a fantastic experience for me. It was really, again, working with folks like you, like planning commissions, zoning boards in these various states. And what it taught me, in addition to the ins and outs of the planning and zoning work itself, is the importance of building coalitions, number one, but also the importance of wise siting. And I can say with all honesty that there were as many sites almost that we walked away from as we pursued. And that was often with direct insights from communities, from boards, commissions, in really what it means to have sound planning and then to abide by that through your planning and your zoning. So a fantastic experience. Ran that department, excuse me, for 7 years. It was then acquired by a large competitor, and I moved on to another fantastic opportunity with a renewable energy company known as Blue Water Wind, where my primary responsibilities were to try to bring renewable energy primarily in the Great Lakes to the Great Lakes region. And in that role, I had the great honor of serving both Governor Granholm on the Great Lakes Wind Council. All of that information is public. It was a fantastic opportunity, again, working with public, private, industry stakeholders looking at renewable energy. I also worked with Governor Ted Strickland in Ohio in that same capacity, as well as the province of Ontario in Canada. While living here, in addition to those jobs, I served on the City Planning Commission in Saugatuck, and have now come to a place where, again, I feel like my commitment to community and commitment to service, I'd like to throw my hat, and I'm honored to throw my hat in the ring to serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I'm appreciative of your time and look forward to any questions, or certainly look forward to the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any questions for our applicants? Brenda?
No, offhand, I cannot think of any. Again, we have a lot of great information in front of us. And then Mike, I thought it was interesting that you did also participate in the city master plan and the tri-community master plan, correct?
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience. I think it's been a little while, so that tri-community plan and the master plans have evolved. It's one heck of a process, and I think I heard from a lot of folks, both members of the board and those looking to be on the planning commission. It's a heck of an opportunity to reach out to communities, solicit feedback from the community, work with the various stakeholders. My personal belief, and you get on thin ice, is that there are very few areas where the tri-communities should not be working more closely together. And so it was an honor to be part of those, yes.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. O'Brien. I've lost track over the last few years, but are you still traveling as much or working out of state?
Yep, so it's a great question. Right now I work for Herman Miller, and I work for a subsidiary of Herman Miller known as Nemshaw Furniture. So that's located in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. It's a 3-year contract, and I'm in a little over 2.5 years into that contract. So I come over on Monday mornings and I come back on Thursdays. And I'm looking to have that's on a every week basis right now, looking to have that start to flip to being back here full time within the next 4 months.
Excellent.
That contract expires.
Because as you know, the ZBA does not meet regularly the way the Planning Commission does. And there's usually sometimes more than 4-week notice before a meeting time is set. So
Right.
you'd be able to.
Yeah, and I have a great deal of flexibility. What I do for NEMSHUF is I'm the vice president of operations for the manufacturing.
Okay.
So there's a transition period where I'll be able, in essence, to be home more often. But I hate to put it this way. This is going to sound cavalier and callous, but I'm hopeful that, I guess, when you're handed a bowl of lemons, you make lemonade. And so with COVID in place right now, I believe fully that I'd be able to bring value immediately, particularly given that we're doing this through Zoom and other tools, and that I'd be fully participative at the termination of my current contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Yes, the Zoning Board of Appeals does meet upon demand. They don't meet terribly often, but they are very black and white standards that are considered when a zoning variance or use variance is requested. So probably the hardest part about Zoning Board of Appeals is that you have to say no to people.
Right.
And that's always kind of tricky. Do you think you would be comfortable saying no to somebody that you are friends or neighbors with?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in my past jobs that I articulated, I was often a person that no was said to at times.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what it feels like to be on both sides of that.
Excellent. Patrick, do you have any comments about that?
Yes, I first, it is an exacting task, and I don't have any problem saying no. I think if we do our jobs, the people who receive the no can be disappointed and will be disappointed, but they'll have a clear understanding of what the issues are and why they're being told no. I don't think it has to become an adversarial issue if we do our jobs correctly.
Yeah.
Excellent answer. Richard, do you have any comments about that? You've been on the board as an alternate.
Yes, and as you asked, we do encounter issues, and we need to be rational and honest about it. And there are the cases where you have to say no because it's not the best interest of Saugatuck Township, and I'm okay with that. I support the township very much, and want the best for our township. So I really don't have a problem with that at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for our applicants?
I have a quick question for Richard and Patrick, and forgive me for not knowing this, but during your current term as an alternate, have you, and if so, how often have either of you had the chance to serve, not be an alternate, actually take action, be involved in the meeting?
This is Richard. I've been on three occasions, John, and one of them was that whole item that came up earlier about the withstanding.
Right.
So I've been involved in that one. So I've been involved in a number of them. But again, it's like I was said. We don't meet on a regular basis. It's an as-need basis, and then the alternates, of course, too, depending on who's available and not available.
Sure.
Will stand in when needed. So that's pretty much what I've encountered.
I've unfortunately only been on one, but I try to get to as many of the meetings as I can and follow them, more from a learning process. But no, unfortunately, I've only been on one.
I'm glad it's one though. Come on, it's true. It's good.
I have a question for Richard or Patrick. Even though you're out of town sometimes, would you prefer to be a regular member, or would you prefer to stay as an alternate? Richard?
Yeah. Alternate probably works well for me because I think if there's other people that are interested, to be honest with you, that are available full-time, and I have been asked at times to participate when I have not been available. So those people that live here year-round, I would say the alternate probably works well for myself, although I'm available anytime by remote, always.
Okay, Patrick?
Well, my interest from the beginning was to be a regular member, but first place, Mike is a resource that we can't afford to lose. And so I would step aside for that aspiration. Also, I think with the change in my scheduling that I'm going to be gone more, I think probably the alternate makes more sense.
Thank you. Any more questions for our applicants?
None here.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
Can I just do what I did with the PC and just recap especially for audience members, make sure I'm keeping track. Thank you. So I believe we had 3 applicants with us tonight, the 2 current alternates and Mr. O'Brien, who is applying to be a member of the ZBA, and that we had 2, Harry Adams and the incumbent Rex Felker, not here tonight. Does that jive with what you show?
I show Jeanette Locker as well.
That was Planning Commission.
No, she indicated on her application.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. And we're crystal clear that they're not available by video or audio.
Well, they're not here.
You never know when they might be in a muted corner. I just wanted to be clear and fair.
And just to be transparent and to piggyback on what John has just stated, everyone has been invited to be part of this meeting, correct? Manager Graham?
Yes. Yep, it was noted in the notice that the decision was anticipated to take place tonight, as well as folks who submitted applications who I confirmed with. They were also invited and encouraged to attend.
Then I'd like to make a motion. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You can make it.
No, is someone going to say something?
No, I was going to make a motion, but you said it first.
Oh, no, go ahead, John.
Come on. I'll second you.
Okay. I move to appoint Mike O'Brien to the Saugatuck Township Zoning Board of Appeals for a term of 3 years, July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2023.
John?
This is
Did you want to
Bigford.
support?
Oh, I thought you was going to do it all in one. I'm sorry.
No, we can't do it all. We should do it separately because
Okay.
there's 2. John?
And I will be happy to support that motion.
Okay, I will call the roll.
Discussion.
Osman? Discussion? Is there any discussion?
I would like to thank Rex Felker for his service. And these are difficult decisions, but I do think that Mike brings a lot of passion and energy and relevant background, experience and knowledge. So I think that we're making the right decision here tonight.
Any other discussion? No discussion. I will call the roll. Osman? Yes. Marcy?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Motion carries. Now we need a second motion for the alternates.
I'm happy to make a motion that we reappoint Richard Brady and Patrick Stewart as alternates to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Any discussion? No discussion. I will call the roll. Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osman? Yes. Motion carries. And we can move on to Tri-Community Joint Board Council meeting. I think that's
Thank you all very
John.
much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, yes, I'm gonna leave this on the agenda till this baby happens. So I just wanted to let you all know I'm still in contact with colleagues in the two cities. I think we are in agreement that this potentially the first ever tri-community board/council meeting should not be done via Zoom, especially since we'd want as many of the public to attend. Having said that, the clock is ticking. We're not sure when we'll be able to have in-person meetings. Someone suggested we do it outdoors, which is intriguing. It seems, so I guess I'd like to hear from you guys if we think should we make a push to maybe do this in October before there are elections in all three communities in November, or at this point, is it more prudent to wait? I'd like to just hear feedback before I get more feedback from the two cities.
I think it might be more prudent to wait because October, I have a feeling that a lot of the people we would want to be inviting might be heavily, maybe, I'm just, assuming that they might be campaigning and that October might not be the best month for a lot of people on these councils. That's just my opinion, and it might work. I might be wrong. So
no, it's a good point.
This is Bigford. I would support doing something outdoors. Just personally, I know everybody's comfort levels are different, and I respect that. I would also support aiming for, just personally aiming for October as well.
I'm open to both.
I think it would probably be better to wait till after the election because we don't know necessarily who the council people will be.
Oh, good point.
Yep, that's true.
So that's my 2 cents.
But probably November and outdoors won't go together.
Right.
Probably not.
But there we are. We're back almost where we were a year ago, waiting for the new year. So I'll share and get feedback. And like I said, I'm going to keep it on the agenda just even when there's no update. But I don't want you to think it won't happen because it will happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the wellhead protection ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item D, this is new but related. As you know, it's recommended that once a year we hold a joint planning commission and township board meeting specifically to review the master plan and discuss potential future changes. I've shared this with the planning commission. Our zoning administrator is aware of this. Some of the feedback I've gotten is that this one seems maybe takes precedent if we could do this sooner than later, which again, was logistics, but I think it is really, really important. And we're going to have, as we now know, some new members of the Planning Commission. So I just want to say, I mean, personally, I'd like to see if we could do this in September. The Planning Commission would have a regular meeting on Monday, the 28th at 7 p.m. I don't know if an hour is enough for this, or maybe we do 2 hours and start the joint meeting at 5. Again, thoughts, feedback, and then I'll take this to my colleagues on the Planning Commission.
The City Planning Commission is on September 17. It's a Thursday. That's another option, but I think it's a good target. I don't know if we can make it, but it's good target.
What, Monday the 28th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with our Planning Commission, right, okay.
Yeah, I think September, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's fine with me.
Okay. Well, since Planning Commission's not meeting this month, I will reach out individually and then to potential, because it will also be at the August meeting, the Planning Commission will be electing a new chairperson too. So thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks, John. Now we'll move on to the wellhead protection ordinance.
Madam Supervisor, before we move on, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
would the board's intention of a joint planning commission township board meeting also be to host that in person? And the only reason I say that is, again, with the unknown of the next couple months, again, as much as I think we're all very excited to be back to in-person meetings, September may be optimistic.
Yeah, that's what I said. We might not be able to pull it off, but we can make it a target, and John can start reaching out to people, and it will be subject to Open Meetings Act, because it will be.
Right. Well, we want it to.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So.
And again, the more public, the better, which is, again, hopefully it would be an in-person meeting.
Thank you.
I know that the Open Meetings Act relaxation of the rules will expire on July 31st. And I haven't heard any rumblings about extending it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was extended. Okay, now wellhead protection.
Yes.
I'm going to let Mr. Graham lead this one a little bit.
Thank you. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to give a little bit of an overview. As I'm sure you all remember, this was initially brought before you all in May. The Township Zoning Administrator, Lene Wells, put together an overview memorandum for all of you, which is also included in the packet. At that time, the Township Board voted to table the consideration of the wellhead protection ordinance. Since then, there's been a wellhead protection team meeting. There's been some clarification in regard to some of the grant funding that is used to fund some of the activities of that team, as well as the wellhead protection team has encouraged that the Township Board revisit this and consider directing staff to move forward. So as there's been some developments in the last couple months, it's back before you all again for consideration. Staff is looking for direction. If you would like us to work to prepare an ordinance for consideration for adoption at a future meeting, that could be one option. Another option could be the Township Board decide to table it again. But one of the things that is new is the Kalamazoo Lake Sewer and Water Authority's managing director reached out, and one of the things on his mind was associated with future grant applications used to fund the practices of the wellhead protection team, and wanting to know if the Township Board doesn't think they're gonna have an ordinance adopted by September, to notify him so it can be included for future consideration on future grant applications. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the key to this, if I can, is just if you all would like staff to prioritize this over the next several months, please give us that direction. We'd be happy to do the background work and bring an ordinance for consideration before you all. Otherwise, if you would like us to prioritize other projects and topics the township is working on, this can continue to be tabled. So I think the question is prioritization at this point, and that's why we bring it back before you all. So I'm happy to answer questions.
The ordinance that the city adopted, I think, is in your packet as well. I can say that the work level for participating in the wellhead protection ordinance is pretty minimal. In fact, our ordinance has been in place for about a year, and the only thing that I have to do with it is to be careful about irrigation wells. And if I issue a permit for a new house, I just put it on as a stipulation that you can't have irrigation wells in the wellhead protection area. It's been minimal workload. Of course, we don't have the development that the township has, but
Sure. And Madam Supervisor, if I can make one more comment, I think one of the pieces that's caused some confusion in some other discussions I've had in regard to this is, both the city of Saugatuck and the city of Douglas have adopted wellhead protection ordinances. I think it's important to at least recognize that the township not only is geographically much larger than the two cities, but we also have a greater variety of land uses that are active in the township, everything from light industrial to agriculture to the more traditional commercial and residential uses. And I think that is something that staff would just need to address. I know there was a public comment towards the beginning about past decisions. The impacts of grandfathering is another thing that staff would need to work closely with our attorney on to make sure that this could be a tool that can be used to regulate potential development moving forward. But we would need to be cautious about impacting development that's already been approved with new rules after the fact. That increases a lot of risk and liability. So those are some of the specifics we would need to narrow down. But as I said before, if this is something the township board would like us to advance, I think staff's in a good place to make that happen with all of your direction.
Right, I agree. I think that assisting Cal Lake with their grant applications is helpful to all of us. It just shows that we want to work together, and I would like to see a motion to direct staff to go ahead and do that.
Hi, Marcy here. Griffin, you're most familiar with our chart of priorities and goals and that kind of stuff. So do you feel, you did just say that the staff feels that they could do it. You do feel that the staff could commit the time to this right now, or would it be better later? And if it's later, what are the repercussions?
Sure. I think this is something that we can make happen. We're constantly time managing, if that makes sense. But this is absolutely an item that was included in the adopted 2020 Township Board goals. The next steps are going to require some outsourcing. And what I mean by that is significant work with some of the professional service and contractors that we work with, specifically attorneys. It may require some additional hours by our contract planner, but that's all work that we plan on. So again, at this point, if this is something you all would like to see happen, we will make it work.
Okay.
Any more questions for Griffin, or does somebody want to make a motion?
I will. This is Marcy. I will move to direct staff to prepare a draft wellhead protection ordinance for future township board consideration.
Is there support?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Okay. Moved by Marcy, supported by Bigford. Any further discussion? I think much like the joint meetings, getting it ready by September is a good target. And if Griffin is overwhelmed or cannot fit it into the schedule and it goes past September, I think that's perfectly understandable.
Okay.
Any other discussion? I'll call the roll. Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich? I'll come back to him. Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. John, you have to unmute yourself so you can vote.
I muted when my landline rang. I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's
I did say yes.
thank you. Motion carries. And we can move on to investment policy and strategy update. I think that's Helmrich and Bigford.
Yeah, we better be unmuted for this, right?
Right.
So jump in when you want, but I just thought I'd set up that since the last board meeting, Abby and I have jumped on this and we're enjoying it and we're learning a lot. We have thus far conducted and concluded 2 preliminary phone meetings, one with Chemical Bank, who are the holder of our one single current investment, the CD I mentioned earlier, and also with CLASS, which is a municipal pool used by many townships and cities across the state, including the city of Saugatuck. We have 2 more in the works being scheduled that we're trying to get done next week. And we're trying to get more information on. We know there's a plethora of investment products, as they say, out there. We currently, as I keep saying, we have just the one. It's about $750,000. Speaking to my colleagues in the city of Saugatuck, I think Saugatuck has, the city has 12, if not 13 different investment products. They, as I said, they work with CLASS and they have CDs and a number of banks. Another reminder that we like to talk about, but it's, I think, important to note, we still continue to maintain about a 14-month cushion in our general fund bank account. 14 months of expenses are covered, which is extremely healthy, and no one wants to hurt that too much under the current economic challenges. But we're trying to come up with a recommendation to bring to you, the board, in August on, there's probably something better we could be doing with some of that money than having it sit there and get a whopping, is it even 1%, Abby? I forget. Is it gone below 1%? But it's not making us much money sitting in Chemical Bank.
Abby, do you have anything to add?
Well, so our intent was to make sure that we're being great stewards of this money that the township has and put it to work for us the best we can in a safe way. John and I are learning a lot. It's a lot of fun in that sense. We're learning what's available, what other townships are doing, what other cities are doing, how you need to really stagger that money and have it, make sure your timing is right to have your funds available. Let's see. And we're not on a time crunch. We don't have a deadline. So we can do this right, and we intend to. So it's been great.
Thanks, Abby. Are we ready to move on to new business?
Yep. Unless there's any questions, let's do it.
Okay, this is the public water and wastewater rate connection fee study. This is a great investment, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Graham for a presentation.
Thank you very much. Just to keep this really brief, this project has been something the township and the township board have been discussing for several months. I think why it may look different to everybody is when we initially started the conversations regarding this project, it was very abstract. And there were lots of questions, and it was not exactly clear where we were going to go and how we were going to get there. So one of the things staff has been working on and spent significant time working on during the budget process was working with our engineering firm and Dana Bird, the township's engineer, to try to clarify some of these projects and make them more digestible and more clear, starting with initial proposals that were shared with you all. You all then graciously adopted a budget with funding associated with those proposals. The next step was to turn those proposals into scopes of service and request authorization to move forward with said projects. The first one of those projects is the one you have in front of you, which is a utility rate connection fee study. But if you wouldn't mind, if you all have the packets in front of you and wouldn't mind turning to page 60 in the packet. And the reason I draw your attention there is and I give Dana quite a bit of credit. I think he did a lot of work to make this what really is a very complex project into a very digestible form. But it is really in 4 different parts, as you will see, all of which in some form or another staff in conjunction with the township board has been discussing. So again, you can see reviews of the township's utility agreements, review of available utility documents. That's going to be specifically related to ages and condition of our utility systems, working towards a capital improvement plan, the actual rate study and connection fee study, moving towards recommendations to potentially amend the township's utility ordinances and or the agreements that were reviewed. So without going into too much more detail, which I am happy to do if there are questions, the request before you all is staff is requesting authorization to proceed with this project. What that would require is staff to sign the 2 scopes of services, so the professional service agreements with the engineering firm and the engagement letter with the financial consultant. We would also require some work from the township's legal counsel. That doesn't require another specific agreement. Some questions I was getting before the fact, just to clarify, the reason a project of this scale isn't required to be bid out is because one of the exceptions included in the township's adopted purchasing policy is for professional services. But other than that, all I would really say is it's staff's feeling, and if I'm not overstepping my understanding of many folks associated with the township, that this is going to be the first step towards addressing a lot of the utility-based challenges the township has not only faced in the past, but we know are upcoming. And this report, this study, this planning, this work, if you will, is going to be the justification that the township needs to address what are going to be some challenges moving forward with the utility system. So I really appreciated Supervisor Osmond's line about this being an investment. I recognize it's an expensive project, but I think when you're looking at the township's current position, this is the first step to addressing a lot of the things we've not only discussed, but are going to be discussing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I appreciate the chance to discuss that.
This is Bigford. I'd just like to point out that this is budgeted for. The board has identified this as a priority, and it is a complex, large, big issue. And I think it's important that we make these first steps now.
This is Helmrich. I also think this is, at least in my view, is actually moved a little quicker than I anticipated when we first started talking about this and reevaluating connection fees, et cetera, especially in light of new industries and new types of agriculture that are now allowed in the township that didn't even exist before
2018.
Right. Pick the year, that's right, before 2018. So I'm happy to see this moving forward. As Abby has said, it's budgeted for. This document, in summary, I find very explicit and helpful. So thank you, Griffin, and pass that on to Mr. Bird and those others who have helped.
Absolutely. If I can, I think the one other line I would comment for you all is the anticipated timeline for this project. It does state on page 59 in the packet that the anticipated timeframe for this project is going to be approximately November through March. So this is going to be approximately a 6-month process. the reason it's coming before you all now is there's going to be some prep work that staff and these professional service providers can do beforehand to really hit the ground running. And the other timeline for this is it's going to occur this winter where some of the engineering firms and some of the folks doing work, it tends to be their slower time. And I would just like to acknowledge, like a project of this scope, I mean, this is a priority for firms like this. This is something that, you know, it's not a cookie cutter project, if you will. This is something that they will be really designating, you know, their expertise towards. So I think that's a real asset for our organization that, as we all know, we don't have a lot of in-house staff. So anytime we can really take advantage of folks who are experts in their field and take advantage of that, I think it's a value add for our community.
Thank you, Griffin. Are there any more questions or comments before we accept the motion? Would someone like to make a motion?
This is
Public here,
Bigford.
I'll move to authorize the township manager to proceed with the proposed public water and wastewater rate / connection fee study project and sign the attached professional service agreements and or engagement letters as applicable.
Is there support?
This is Marcy. I'll support.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, no discussion, I will call the roll. Marcy?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Osman? Yes. Motion carries. So we can move on to roadway maintenance program and funding review. Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Similarly to the aforementioned project, this is another one that has been discussed over the last several months. It also is included, or the resources required to conduct this project were also included in the adopted budget. So to just highlight this specific project, what I would point out is the township's current road plan ends after 2021. So if I remember correctly, and it's in here, so I'm sorry, I should just look. I think it was 2018 to 2021. So one of the things the township should start thinking about is what comes after that. My understanding is that initial road maintenance plan was done in-house by township staff at that time, and really prioritized identifying specific projects and estimating costs with the assistance from the Allegan County Road Commission based off the amount of money that was anticipated to come in from the township special voted road millages. So what this would not only do is those same steps, but in addition to that, it is going to help to justify what roads are being selected. So the township board is still going to have some say in regard to what specific years projects are conducted. However, I think in terms of the township transitioning to a more professional data-driven organization, this is going to take the current road plan one step further and give us some more engineering data and justification for why we are spending taxpayer dollars on certain road projects. So similarly to the other project, if I can draw your attention to page 76, I think the proposal does a pretty good job of breaking out some of the specific topics that will be covered. If you go to the very last bullet point, it really shows that a list of candidate roads will be developed and suggested fixes. But what I also think is noteworthy for the board is the last bullet point on page 76, which multiple funding levels will be evaluated. I think that is important to note because the timing of this report will also be being concluded about the time the township board's going to want to start considering discussing potential renewals of the township's road millages. So producing a report that shows these are the roads we intend to fix over the next several years will give the township board a helpful tool to potentially justify renewals of those millages. So with that, again, I'm happy to answer questions. The anticipated cost of the project is included in the proposal, as well as the timeline. One other thing that I'm proud to share with you all, just because it really reflects the prioritization the board has put on relationship building and collaboration and cooperation, is we've already approached the Allegan County Road Commission, and their managing director, Craig Atwood, has been nothing but positive about this proposed project. And he reviewed the proposal, as well as expressed to me on multiple occasions that they would be willing to do whatever they can to assist us with this process. So I think that's a real positive sign of these relationships that we've begun to build.
Good. Any questions for Griffin before we continue? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
This is Marcy. I will move to authorize the township manager to proceed with the proposed roadway maintenance program and funding review project and sign the attached professional service agreement as applicable.
Do we have a second?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Any further discussion? Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries. And we can move on to participation in public meetings via remote access. I think that Brenda is going to take a look at this one or walk us through.
Thank you. I had started researching this when I was brand new, and I think that we need something in case Governor Whitmer cannot extend her executive order. I think that we should consider allowing voting remotely. And so what I did was I made sure that there have been several bills that have started and then died that want to completely prevent that. The only change in the Open Meetings Act has been that the military, anybody in the military who's sitting on one of these boards can vote remotely. I spoke with the chair or the head of legislation at MTA. Just wanted to confirm that a couple of the House bills that I had looked at had indeed died on the vine, which they had. So what we would need in order, well, wait, before I get to there. So one of the things is, first of all, there's nothing in the Open Meetings Act or Michigan law to indicate that members attending electronically cannot vote. So that's good. That has not changed. And then a lot of things that are recommended, and I don't know if they're law, but recommended is that, well, maybe quorum might be law. You still have to have in-people quorum. So in our case, that would be 3 people would have to be on the premises when we go back to physical meetings. And 2 could be remote if necessary. The other thing that's important is that, like we're doing now, all votes have to be by roll call so that the people attending the meeting can hear, and they have to be able to hear who's voting for what and how they're voting. I sent the members a couple of samples, one of which is the Allegan County board, what they do. Another one was from the Michigan Library. From the Michigan Library, at Michigan.gov. Sorry, guys. So also, if a person is remote, they would not get their per diem, obviously, because they're not attending the meeting. And here's what I am looking at, or here's my reasoning. I don't think going on vacation necessarily would be a good criteria, but especially right now, if we have compromised members who really cannot yet attend meetings, if her executive orders are not extended, and then if somebody is very sick or caring for someone who's sick who really cannot physically get to the meeting, I think we should consider it. I know this board well enough to know that there's nobody here that could take advantage of it. A policy can be changed, and I think that's all I have. So what I'm hoping is that we could direct staff plus me, I'm willing to volunteer to do this, to work on a policy until such time when, I know the MTA is working on, they're also working on something to carry us forward. The Open Meetings Act, I think that was left open on purpose. It's pretty much for us to decide. I also discovered that I talked to the municipal VMML, and it is legal also for them to do that, so to vote remotely. So that I was hoping that we could agree to maybe write a policy containing all these caveats and move forward, so that for these special cases, we can allow people to not only attend the meeting, but vote. So for example, regular trustees like myself and Stacy Aldrich, our real statutory duty, our only statutory duty really is to vote. And so I know for her and for me, it's very important to be able to vote. So I would just like to hear your thoughts on this.
So you're talking about a policy.
Yes.
And you're talking about maybe getting sample policies to start with, so you're not starting from scratch.
I have a couple in here.
And then
look at Beaver Islands. I don't know if Beaver Island is a general township, but obviously Beaver Island has one, and they have good reason, because when they fly out, they can't get back in a lot of times in the winter. So yes, I have two here, and then, you know, I'm sure I can find, I'm sure there are more out there, and I'm sure that the MTA can direct me to those other policies.
So you're talking about that you would gather that information, put
Yes.
together a proposed policy, and give that to Griffin for his review and for the attorney. And then take action on it?
Yes.
And so we would have an in-person quorum, and others could participate remotely.
Yes.
That seems to me to be very reasonable. And if you can do the legwork, so we don't overburden our poor township manager.
Right.
I think that sounds reasonable. I suspect it's going to be extended for at least one more month, the executive order. I don't know that for a fact,
right,
but I would suspect that's an issue. So it's not that we have to do it tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
But that sounds pretty reasonable to me. What do you think, Griffin?
Absolutely. Yep. I'm happy to do whatever I can to help.
Yeah, Griffin, the only help I might need is when it gets to the actual writing of the policy, although I can look at our other policies as well, and I will have samples. So I don't want to take staff time to do this because
sure.
No, have enough going on.
This sounds to me to be exactly like what we talked about when we adopted all of the different policy handbooks, when we talked about these are great starting places for our organization, but over time we're going to be able to build on those. This to me seems like a perfect fit for the administrative policy handbook. We'll be able to put it in there with some of the others. related to township board business. So I'm happy to do what I can to help. I agree, only because it has to do with, again, state law and what we are enabled to do. When it's to the point where you have a draft that you're comfortable with, Brenda, I'm happy to work with the attorney and to give it a review myself, and we can go from there. So no, happy to do what I can to help.
Thanks.
I think that's all the direction we need on this right now. We're not adopting anything or putting together anything. Brenda's going to do the legwork, and Griffin, along with the attorney, will final it up.
And
Okay.
Griffin, can I ask you a question? Will we be reviewing our administrative policies on a regular basis? I can't remember if we put that in there.
There's nothing included in it at this time about, setting a specific date for review. I think the goal would be to review all of those regularly. At this point, we don't have a policy review schedule. I think, like many things, a goal to strive for our organization is to have a regular maintenance schedule and a contract rebidding and renewal schedule and a policy renewal schedule, review schedule. So the best I can do right now is just to say, yeah, the intention is absolutely to continue to regularly review those, but there's not a specific timeline set at this time that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks for doing the work on this, Brenda. I appreciate you being so thorough and really thinking about all angles of this issue.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to committee reports. Planning Commission.
Okay, this is Helmrich here. The Planning Commission met on June 22nd via Zoom. We had 6 members present, 1 absent. About a dozen public commenters were present or participants participating, and they were mainly or almost entirely speaking about the site plan for a development at Old Allegan Road and 63rd Street, the LB Blumert property. Many of them were residents of Hawthorne Court, which is a street across from the entrance to this proposed project. They were expressing concerns over traffic and safety, hours of operation, and the fact that the entrance to the warehouses and storage units being proposed is so close to their homes. The Planning Commission went on to approve a plan from Build SB, and that's Scott Bosgraff's company, for additional warehouses and storage units on 135th Avenue, just west of Blue Star, with a dozen conditions in place, including additional windows and landscaping requirements. We then went on to approve the plan for Just Amir, which is LB's project, for 44 buildings with 13 conditions, including language on potential contaminants on the site and drainage issues if any contaminants are found. Zoning Administrator Lene Wells presented her review of the master plan, as she did to us the previous month, I believe, and shared with the, at the Township Board last month. I then shared our board, this board's desire for the Planning Commission and Zoning Administrator to begin a review of ordinances relative to lot and house minimum sizes in the township, and expressed our desire to see as I said, that reconsidered to maybe allow for some smaller homing in the affordable housing category. Also discussed the joint board PC meeting that we talked about earlier tonight, and with the intent to review together the goals of the master plan as it now exists. And finally, I reminded 2 commissioners, Preetz and Lozano, that their terms were up at the end of June, and that this board would be considering those seats at our meeting in July, which we have just done. Thank you.
You want me to go ahead? Yeah, okay. I'll let Griffin talk about the road commission, but Griffin, I was wondering, relative to the person who spoke earlier, and I wrote his name down, but I have shuffled the whole packet.
Mr. Stern, I think.
Yes. I know that Dugout and 63rd have come up before, and I think, aren't they on one of our plans, or is there a way we can find out through Craig?
Absolutely. I think I can even provide probably a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
the gentleman who spoke, and let me start out by saying, Mr. Stearns, and I believe it was Mr. Dorr.
Yeah.
If you would like additional information, please call my office this week, and I'm happy to fill you in even in more detail, or we can schedule a time where you can come in and I can show you some of the documents that I have in regard to this project. But correct. So if you all will think back to what I believe was December, the township board approved work orders for a number of projects for 2022. One of them was including work for stretches of Dugout and Riverside, and it was decided to go the middle ground in between traditional gravel and paving, which was settled on asphalt millings. If you will also remember, the township board approved bids related to all of those projects for the exception of Dugout Road and Riverside in what I believe was April. The reason for that was that project was not to the point of being able to go out for bid because there were still specific right-of-way and easement challenges that needed to get sorted out. As Mr. Stern mentioned earlier, there are some challenges that needed to be rectified between the original platting of the road and where the road exists today. So my understanding is the road commission, via letters that were distributed, were trying to rectify some of those disconnects. I cannot say for certain, but my best guess for why some folks would have received letters and others wouldn't is only the folks who would have had property that would have needed to be rectified in regard to either an additional easement or right-of-way challenges would have received those letters. That's something that we can definitely follow up with the road commission on, but that's my educated guess, if you will. And then just this week, I received updates from the road commission that they are nearing completion of acquiring the necessary permission, so right away or easements associated with the project. And it was shared with me that they are preparing the bid documents now. They anticipate it going out for bid in the next several weeks, anticipate a bid opening in early to mid-August. So I would share with you all, with the information I have at this point, I would anticipate a bid recommendation be brought before you all at the September meeting, which is obviously later than I think we initially attended, but with COVID and other challenges, everything I've been told this year is they still anticipate this project to be able to be completed in 2020. So that's the information I have at this time. As I said, again, I'm happy to discuss it in more detail with residents who have questions. Also, they're always welcome to reach out to the road commission, who can probably even give them more detailed information, just because at this point, I am more the messenger or the liaison between the two bodies, if you will. So that's really the only update I have right now in regard to road projects. Unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the floor open for questions from attendees, or is this still restricted to the board?
This is still township business meeting. There will be opportunity at the end for more public comments.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Griffin? Okay, Parks Commission. I think Griffin has the memo from Jim.
Yep, and if I can, Madam Supervisor, I believe Lori Goshorn was on the call. If she's still with us, she's also an elected member of the Township's Parks Commission, and I think would be very willing and able to go over any of those items in more detail. But otherwise, you're all correct. I shared with you some of the highlights from recent Parks Commission activity.
I'm still here, so if anyone has any questions, why don't you, Griffin, go through the list since you've got an email from Jim, and if there's further clarification or curiosity, I'll chime in.
Absolutely. If I can find that specific item. Oh, I apologize. So some of the items that were addressed at the July 1 Parks Commission meeting, which I am also very pleased to announce was held at River Bluff Park, outside, appropriately social distanced, but the Township Parks Commission was trying to use it as a way to highlight some of the great park assets the township has to offer. But on the list from Jim Searing, the Park Commission Chair, number 1 is a donation policy. The Park Commission is anticipating voting to adopt and recommend the adoption of a donation policy to the Township Board at their August meeting. The Township Board would then consider that for consideration likely in September. River Bluff garbage. There has been some concerns that some household waste is being dumped at the River Bluff garbage. I know speaking with Mr. Searing today, he personally went out there and removed some personal household waste. So that's something the township is attempting to address. That's not a new problem. It's gone in phases before, is my understanding. This reads, we plan to change the use of the special use, the Township Parks Commission discussed changing the use of the special use section of the dog park to create a second small dog area for more timid and small dogs. My understanding is that's something they'll continue to discuss. They are continuing to review and acquire estimates for some work that was included in the budget for the River Bluff Park shed pavilion out by the river, as well as some work on the dog park fence. They're also looking at estimates to replace the change on the swings at River Bluff Park. And they are also considering how they can assist the township in planting additional trees at the township hall and in their township parks. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Griffin or for Lori? None. Kalamazoo Lake Water and Sewer Authority. Do we have any reports?
If I can make a comment on that one, I'm very pleased to share. I had a very productive meeting with Mike McWiggin, the township's appointed representative to the Kalamazoo Lake Harbor Authority. We spoke for quite some time last week, and one of the items we discussed was the potential of scheduling a future workshop via special meeting for the township board to go over some of the future utility challenges the township is likely to face, as well as clarify some items regarding the relationship and responsibilities and obligations between Cal Lake and the township. Mike mentioned that he would be very willing to be a part of that. And at this point, I more just throw it out to see if that's something the board would be interested in. That would likely be several months away still, but it may be a great opportunity not only to continue to build the relationship with the Kalamazoo Lake Harbor Authority, but also educate the township board on some upcoming challenges related to our utilities.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Water and sewer are under the ground, and you really don't think about them very much until water doesn't come out of your tap or your toilet doesn't flush.
Yeah.
I think that's something that would be really helpful, especially in light of the rate study that's coming forward. It would help us understand the results of that better. Any questions about that? Nope. Emergency Services Committee? Nothing going on there.
I spoke with Mr. Tony Schiffa earlier today. He apologized he wasn't able to attend the meeting. We are still at the point of waiting for the final agreement from Life Ambulance, which will then be reviewed one more time by staff and legal counsel before being signed by the township clerk as authorized at the June meeting.
Perfect. Interurban, Mr. Graham.
Representative Lori Babinski's report was in the packet. I don't know if you all got a chance to review that. I'm happy to read it if you would prefer.
It's short.
Yep.
Sure. So the CARES Act reimbursement for this year and next year will cover the lost fare box revenue and expenses. We now have a second bus scheduled and are allowing 4 passengers on our larger buses and 3 on the smaller buses. When we move into the Safe Start Phase 5, possibly July 1, we will consider increasing to a 50% occupancy depending on state guidelines and begin fare collection. Plans for celebrating our birthday at the July 1 Music in the Park event have now been postponed until sometime in August. Also talking to the city of Douglas about possibly adding our celebration to a Douglas social sesquicentennial celebration. The board approved the annual L4029 form and approved the 0.4815% millage rate for the December 2020 tax collection submitted by Lori Babinski, Saugatuck Township rep.
And our open board report. I'll take you in the order that I see you on my screen. John.
Yeah, I just have one thing. I just wanted to bring it up because I've had conversations and heard concern from other trustees as well as our colleagues in the 2 cities that we might want to discuss in more thoroughness at a future meeting if the township board might want to consider a resolution relative to the wearing of masks as the COVID-19 pandemic continues and peaks and may even increase more, which we hope doesn't happen. That's all.
Brenda.
Relative to that, I've been in establishments because I really am trying to keep in touch with the local businesses, retailers, but also restaurants. I have seen with my own eyes some of the hassles that people are giving the people who work. I mean, it is unbelievable. I've heard some things that, yeah. So it's something that I would at least be open to discussing. Whether or not it would work is a whole nother point. But I really feel passionate about it, especially inside when you're in close quarters. So I definitely, I appreciate the banners. I don't know if you've all seen the banners and the signs that are in the stores. I don't know if it's helping, but I just, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just wish that people would be kinder to the people who are working it. They are trying to follow the law. And boy, are they getting grief for it. It's unbelievable. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was, it is an open board report, and I wanted to give an open congratulations to Griffin, who just got engaged. So when you see him on the street, congratulate him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My heart's not good.
Yes. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, Abby.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Cindy, I really don't have anything either. We covered a lot today, and congratulations for doing such a great meeting. And a big, big thanks to Griffin for for all the prep work he does to make sure these meetings go smoothly. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have the manager's report.
Thank you very much. Before I get into my more normal comments, updates, and announcements, if you will, one of the things we've been discussing over the last year is a more regular review of not only the status of the township's budget, but also the status of the township's adopted goals. So I did this also in April upon the conclusion of the end of the first quarter. So again, back before you are updates in regard to the township board goals, as well as some budget documents associated with the end of last fiscal year. I'm happy to go into these in as much or as little detail as you all would like. I think the only thing I'll start with for now is if you all look at the color-coded township progress tracker. I've been trying to make a pretty easy way for you to all follow the status of the goals you all adopted this year. As you can see, the bolded boxes are the times that were originally outlined as timelines for these projects in the goals document. And then green means moving forward as planned, yellow means progressing but slowly, and then red means kind of off the tracks. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to comment on any of those in more detail. I also spent some time updating the ongoing projects master list. Again, I'd like to recognize that this is definitely not an all-inclusive list, but if anything, it's quite extensive. I think that we have 33, larger scale active projects that are being moved on, which again, I like to continue to bring up to the board just so you all recognize the number of things that our organization is not only advancing, but also trying to juggle and manage in terms of a time management and capacity aspects. So with that, I will also move on to the budget document is included in there. I think Treasurer Helmrich covered a lot of the highlights towards the beginning of the meeting, but I just want that to be in there for you all in terms of the accountability piece you all perform in regard to the budget, as well as this year's General Appropriations Act included some more formal reporting requirements that the report included in this document would cover. So I'm happy to go into any of those in more detail. Unless you all want to stop there and discuss those, I'll also go into my few other more traditional manager report topics, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm pleased to share that the township's MERS pension system annual actuarial valuation as of the end of 2019 increased from 44% funded to 47% funded. I know this has been a priority for the board. You all have been allocating additional funding above and beyond the minimum required allocations each year, and you continue to see the positive impacts of that by a slow and steady increase in the township's funding percentage. I participated in a webinar hosted by MERS today that went into more detail in regard to that report than you all probably will ever want to hear. But if you would like, I am more than happy to talk to you about that report in more detail. Staff has also begun to prepare summary information for the township board associated with the numerous formal and informal agreements the township has with contractors and professional services providers to try to move forward with another one of the township board's adopted goals. I plan to bring the initial summary information before you all at the August meeting. And at that point, we can look for additional guidance and next steps from the township board. I will say that at this point, my recommendation looks to be proposing a cycle, as I kind of alluded to earlier in the meeting. We have numerous agreements. Some of them we know how old they are. Some of them we don't know how old we are. Some agreements don't exist. So it would be a really an impossible task to try to tackle those all at once. So I think my recommendation is going to be we try to address 1 or 2 a year and maybe a 4 or 5 year cycle. And then as we also discussed with some of the policies moving forward, we can then try to be more sustainable about how we address some of those. Moving on to COVID-19 and the township's response. Since the June meeting, staff has transitioned back to working from the office full-time, as well as the township hall is back open to the public with restrictions. We have implemented a number of safety precautions and are continuing to do the best we can to encourage residents to comply with not only required safety requirements, but also above and beyond and encouraged ones. I'd also like to share that I'm pleased that the township was able to partner with the city of Saugatuck in the hanging of some safety banners this weekend. City manager Kirk Harrier worked really hard to design some really high quality banners, and then the township was able to participate by allowing one of them to be installed in township property over by the entrance to the city by Holland Street. I think it's another great example of the tri-communities continuing to try to work together. With that, the last thing I'll say in regard to COVID and one of, I guess, my cliche lines over the last several months, but things are continuing to change rapidly, so we will continue to do the best we can to evaluate options, not only for future public meetings, but also township office operations. The master meter project, if you all remember, was a large project that the township agreed to cost share on. We recently received the last bill associated with that. I'm in the process of reviewing that for payment, and we are still waiting on the results from Cal Lake, but that is something that will be shared with you all once those are received. Staff's also working with the engineering firm, Prine and Newhoff, in regard to next steps in the water service line inventory project. At this point, I am working to prepare an update letter for those impacted residents and an online survey that we will use to try to address the low-hanging fruit, if you will, in terms of the verification phase of the project. And then next steps will include hiring contractors to conduct site visits to confirm some other aspects of this project. So it's going to be a multi-year project, but we're continuing to chunk along on it. And with that, my last comment would just be, I'd like to acknowledge the growth of the township board over the last year, just in terms of how you all are becoming so much more comfortable and self-resilient when it comes to conducting these meetings. And I think that is something you all should be very, very proud of. Administering a public meeting is not an easy task, and the ability for you all to do it in a calm and a professional manner, I want you to all know, and actually you can because we record the meetings, but if you all were to look back where we were a year ago to where we all are now, I think it's something you all should be very, very proud of. So I just like to acknowledge you all for that. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to go into any of those topics in more detail, but that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Griffin? Hearing none, we will open the floor to public comments. If you'd like to speak, unmute yourself and state your name.
Hello, this is Scott Stearns. I would just like to see how can I get some answers to the questions that I have asked?
I think Griffin did go into that a little bit. He wants you to either come to the office or contact him for details.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Anybody? Unmute yourself and state your name.
Hello, John Doerr.
Yes.
Hello. Hi,
Yes.
okay. Just a point of clarification. Griffin, did I hear you say that the right-of-way has been acquired or the rights for the project? Or did I misunderstand that?
Madam Supervisor, would you like me to address that?
Yeah, yes, please.
My understanding from the most recent email, which would have been from today, is they are finalizing the acquisition of the right-of-way they needed.
Okay.
You can take that for what it's worth. And again, you're welcome to contact me. I can share those correspondence with you. Again, all my communications are public record. So I'm happy to show you what I've received, and I'm happy to go into some more details. Again, I think as the board's pointed out today, it's probably more appropriate to do either in the office or at a phone call with me directly. But I'm pleased to hear you guys brought up this topic because there's actually been some movement on it just of this week. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is Scott Stearns. I apologize for doing this now, but what's your availability tomorrow? Because I'm in the vicinity of your office tomorrow. After that, I'm going to be out of town for a little while.
Go ahead, Griffin, if you have your calendar. If you don't, you can, why don't you, Mr. Stearns, why don't you call Griffin in the morning at the office when he has his calendar available?
Sure.
And talk to him directly.
All right.
Any other public comments? Last chance, unmute yourself and state your name. Hearing nothing, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Nobody wants to leave. This is Marcy. I will motion to adjourn the meeting at, what time is it?
8:24.
Or whatever you have on your.
8:24, Apple time, Mac time. I'll support that.
Motion by Marcy, supported by Helmrich. Any further discussion? All those in favor say, oh no, I can't do that. Bigford.
Yes.
Helmrich.
Yes.
Marcy.
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Meeting adjourned.
Good night. Ooh, that was fast.